la registrazione su YouTube. Mi senti Marco, va bene? Well, we are about to conclude this fifth Astril conference. We have had 2 days of intense, scientific discussion on both theoretical and empirical grounds related to Italian macroeconomic perspective, trends in the labor market, and aspects of our welfare system. I would like to thank again all the participants to the conference for their contributions that will be collected in the Astril YouTube channel and in the Astril website. The final act of our conference is the lecture held by Professor Giovanni Dosi of Sant'Anna School. There is no need, to introduce him. All of us know, I believe, his contributions in the fields of macroeconomics, structural change, and technical progress. The title of his lecture is More of the Same, the PNRR as a Missed Marshall Plan. So please, Professor Dosi, with pleasure, I give you the floor, and I thank you again to have accepted our invitation.
Well, I thank you for the invitation, and I want to apologize because I could not attend most of the conference. In fact, involved in terrible negotiation on indeed the use of the little share of the PNRR devoted to universities. And as you can imagine, the negotiations are tough and vicious. Having said that, in order to introduce my main thesis that the PNRR is basically a massive waste of money, and that in part we should repay back to transfer to private profits. In order to get to that, I would like to discuss briefly what was before, both in terms of relatively long-term tendencies in the international and Italian economy, and as the effect of the answer to the pandemic. I decided not to show slides because if there is no mathematics or no statistics, slides decrease the attention of the reader, of the listener, thinking, I will read it later. I noticed it in conference with old and young people, so I made the choice of not presenting the slides. If you want to get to papers, there is an article on International Labour Review 2019 by Dosi and Virgilito on the long-term tendencies. There is another by Dosi, Fanti, Virgilito on the Journal of Industrial and Business Economics 2020 on the pandemic and the related issue. And there is a more recent one by myself, more focused on mission vaccines on intereconomics that just came out. Well, well before the pandemic, what are the long-term patterns in the last, say, 30, 40 years? Well, first, in the West, we know very well, we had an acceleration of the deindustrialization. I repeat in the West because this is not so, for example, in China, that became the factor of the world, basically. This is the second major direct factor, has been associated with stagnant wages and a divergence between productivity growth and wage growth. This is different across countries and is different in terms of pre-tax and post-tax. But the tendency is that the trend is identical across country. In the United States, is perfect. You get until the mid-70s that productivity and wages go exactly together. Then wages become flat and productivity continues to grow. In other countries, less clear. For example, the divergence in Italy started in 1980 with essentially the defeat of the workers in Fiat, but then gets sanctioned with the concertation, the concertazione, the Ciampi agreement, that was the total surrender of the trade union movement. Well, not surprising, associated with that, you have a decline in the labor share in income. Again, everywhere with different intensity across the West, with massive surge in corporate profit, especially financial profits, and associated with a general rentification of the economy. A rentification that includes the increase in financial rents, but not only. For example, you had an increase in real estate rent, and last but not least, the rent associated with informational monopolies, the Google, the Facebook of this world. Within these old tendencies, you have soaring inequalities. Inequalities that are not only between wages and profits earner, but also within the group of wage earner, you have a polarization in which, in fact, in the bottom part of the wage distribution, you had a fall in real wages, especially in the United States. I mean, a little anecdote. I finished high school in the United States, in Buffalo, New York, and to buy cigarettes and to have some money, I was working part-time in a supermarket. And I was earning the minimum wage, $5 per hour. Well, that remained $5 per hour until Obama. You can imagine, there are a few months in between when I was 17 and the Obama administration, right? You have, if you zoom in the job structure, you have increasing polarization and what I call a sort of neo-dualistic structure. You remember the classic of development saying, well, we have a dual economy, a modern part and a traditional part. Industrialization, modernization will mean the absorption by the modern part of the informal part. Now you have a new dualism in which you have an increase in the non-protected, precarious part, which is yet another difference with the period, say, the 30 years after World War II, the Golden Age. This is, it happens even in countries like Germany. with the new labor laws, around 30 years ago, the trade unions accept a dualism even within the same factories and the same firms. And you have other countries like Italy in which you've got wilderness. Only in few countries you have a working class structure that remains relatively protected, homogeneously protected, but there are very few. Sweden, for example. And this is increased enormously by the gig economy. With the gig economy, then you've got a sort of digital, on the one side, you've got a digital Taylorism, say the Chinese model of digital control of Tayloristic work. On the other side, you've got the Uber, Fedora, etc. of this world, in which you have hyper exploitation, and this is associated with an ideology in which you're yourself exploiting yourself. There is the ideology of being the entrepreneur of yourself, being in charge of your own time, while of course you have got this is a sort of high-tech putting out system. We are, before we go back there, before the Industrial Revolution, and the factory was introduced also for technological reason and for control reason, because if you kept the looms in the families, they were deciding their own rhythm, they were stealing cloth, etc. Now you can have a putting out system in which there are computers that control what you do no matter where you are. So you've got the control of the factory without the socialization of the factory. I mean, this is not the time to discuss it, but it is fundamental also if anyone thinks of recomposition of the working class, etc. This is a major issue. These, I think, are general trends in the West. In Europe, you have got two other major tendencies. One, after 2008, you have got the self-inflicted damages of austerity policy. That these are all of our own making. Of our own, I mean, not us, but a international financial capital represented formally by the Franco-German leadership in political terms. And you have, since long ago, the lack of any industrial policy able to shape the rate and direction of innovation and industrial revolution. Note that this is not the case of the United States. The United States never used the word industrial policy, but they practice it. But they preach to us that we should not have an industrial policy because it's market distorting, etc., etc. And we send our PhDs to study in the United States, and they come back and say, we should not have the industrial policy. Industrial policy is a bad word because it's distorting, etc., etc. The US have it, of course. It's simply, I mean, just a little parenthesis, but to illustrate, American venture capitalists, wow, who is the biggest American venture capitalist? The federal government, the Small Business Administration. This is the biggest, by far, the biggest venture capitalist in the United States. Everything that is minimally related to security is not subject to competition policy. In Europe, we take for granted what our young people, our young chicken, tell us after being getting a doctorate in the States, and this is a real problem. Because then they become also the second-rate economists that work at the European Union, in the governments, and they create a sort of zeitgeist. It is very dangerous. Well, even more so in Italy. On the top of that, we have the same thing, but strengthened by what I call the technological catching up interrupters, with basically the dismantling of the few oligopolies, participation of oligopolies of the Italian industry, and this terrible ideology, I mean, the small is beautiful, the third Italy, etc., etc. So that we were participating more in the high-tech international oligopolies in the early 70s than now. We dismantled computer, telecom, good deal of fine chemicals, pharmaceuticals. We are selling off the few things that remain. Robotics, etc. And finally, I ended the complaints, the sad pattern. We have, since the early 80s, mid-80s, a widening territorial gap, north-south divide. You can say everything bad about the state-owned enterprises, but the state-owned enterprises were also a mechanism of equalization, apart from being a great place of accumulation of technological capability. This is the picture. Then comes COVID. COVID, as such, does not have a great impact. I mean, it's not the Black Plague. The Black Plague killed 1/3 of the labor force and 1/3 of the homeowners and landowners. The big damage has been done by the way we introduce the curbing measure on the pandemic itself, not of the pandemic. I mean, with the Black Plague, 1/3 of the European population died. This is absolutely not the case in the case of COVID. It could have been that emergency could have been the opportunity for a good, virtuous restart. On the contrary, it seems to me, the immediate reaction has been, as implied, pervasive form of social control, limitation of individual and collective right, and a sort of perpetuation of a forced dichotomy between economics, and health security. With a large neglect on the impact of the measures that were taken on income, working condition, access to health services. There were across-the-board measures that occurred had an impact that was very well regressive in every respect. I mean, if you want to fine, I hate the word representative agent, but if you want to have the representative lockdown victim is a woman, immigrant with children, living in a periphery, possibly in less than 60 square meters. This is the representative victim, or extended to representative family, which can be either immigrant or non-immigrant, but marginal, doing informal works, and many of these informal works have been shut down for months. This is not the time, the place to enter into the detail, but for example, the work at home, stay at home is very different across social groups. I mean, it can increase the precariousness and the social control and decrease income, or at the opposite extreme, you see the advert on the CNN that you have this manager in Dubai on the beach drinking martini and doing his work on the computer and saying, come to Dubai and do smart work. Yes, great. Also in terms of activities, it had a major different effect. I mean, a wide range of services, especially those related to social consumption, transport, entertainment. In general, socialization has been hit really badly, with effects that go well beyond the strict economic effect. On the other side, you had those firms that provided health provision and equipment, big pharma, mobile telecommunication, digital communication, increased enormously their income and stock value. In fact, the top, call them information and pharma-centered monopolies, oligopolies, they made huge money out of the pandemic, and they continue to do it. I mean, if you want to have a scale, you go from very limited or no protection for informal workers and non-working poor, even more so if immigrants. You have limited protection for regular employees and small businesses. Limited, it means limited, not much. Much greater umbrella for large non-financial firms, and a full parachute for financial and real estate rents. I mean, what is totally protected, not only in Italy, but in other countries, are financial and real estate rents. That is, they are written in the stone, the associate that with anti-redistributive fiscal policies. I mean, if you look at the work by Furcieri et al., Furcieri Austria et al., one latest contribution is on the industrial and corporate change. And these are International Monetary Fund people. And they denounce the regressive character of most policies in the West. They are not Trotskyist. Given that, I mean, what would have been, even without the Piano Nazionale, could have been measure that we could have afforded? One, increase the overall public expenditure on the health system, strengthening local hospitals and laboratories. Second, partly compensating that with the reduction of public subsidies to private clinics that are there more interested in profit seeking than in the general medical care. Third, strengthening the role of general practice doctors. We did exactly the opposite, by the way. I mean, the absolutely idiotic rules that doctors, family doctors, cannot intervene for COVID patients. And the COVID patients have got to wait until they're nearly dying and then call the 118 number that generally does not answer. And the doctors that do that, violate that, save lives but risk being expelled by the doctor association and being prevented from practicing. In the Salerno case, which is absolutely idiotic. This could have been matched, at least partly, with a strengthening of public research. I mean, in the paper that I was mentioning at the beginning on vaccines, on intereconomics, I examine this paradox that you had a very rich knowledge base that allows the Western societies to reach a new type of vaccine in few months. And you have a very dysfunctional relation between private big pharma and the public knowledge generation, so that you have public knowledge generation that does not get to the last step of mass application. And then the mass application is done with further public subsidies by big pharma without running any risk of exploration, because the exploration has already been done by, I'm talking now about mRNA, by University of Mainz, Harvard, UPenn, University of Texas, San Antonio. These were generating the basis of the knowledge that then was privately exploited by Pfizer Moderna. And they continue to do it in an extremely cynical way without giving the coverage to third world countries. And in fact, via the international organization, preventing third world countries to develop their own rules. The Cuban vaccine, that is at least as powerful as their vaccine, has not been authorized basically anywhere. with the exception of Mexico, Vietnam, and a few other places. This could have been the occasion, on the contrary, to strengthen the public research system and have research going all the way to production, to the stage of production. Then you can let the private sector do the scaling up, but then they've got to produce at marginal cost. So a vaccine should cost, I don't know, €0.50, max €1. We did not do that, and on financial side, on the fiscal side, we did not even try to finance part of the measure that were associated with the lockdown with taxes on rents, taxes on wealth, and we are talking about the decrease in the tax bracket, with the decrease in tax bracket. I mean, a golden rule is the more the tax bracket, the more progressive is the tax. The less the tax bracket, the more regressive is the tax. And now the mantra is reduce the tax bracket to simplify. Simplify means making more and more transfer to the rich. I mean, after all, in the Byzantine reform, if I remember well, the top marginal bracket was 73%. Now it has decreased to 43. And last but not least, it is time to tax the digital rents. It is possible, but there is very little willingness to do it. Now, what we have done hints, in fact, at a new normal in which the dominant intellectual discourse is pushing for maintaining and indeed reinforcing the status quo, the current power structure, income distribution, and if possible, worsening it. Here comes the plan. What is the plan? Basically, the plan is a mixture of an amazing amount of blah blah, fuffa in Italian. I mean, if you read it, it's like mixing together some management consultant, second-rate economist, and bureaucrat, having them drink a bit, and then asking them to write a poem. This is basically the content, the narrative of, and it is very robust in the sense, I have a definition of a robust paper. A robust paper is a paper in which if you randomly choose the order of the word, the meaning does not change. And this is extremely robust. I mean, you can use in every combination, project, imagination, new generation, inclusiveness, gender, modernity, solidarity. I mean, mix it as you want, you get always the same result. The concrete part is a massive transfer to profits. And the non-monetary reform essentially involves one, destroying worker right, further destroying worker right, if possible. Second, strengthening intellectual property right, that is the contrary to what I was saying before. And hinting at a fiscal system more aggressive, even if without talking about it, but this is the hint and this is the practice. I mean, remember that the order of magnitude of the PNRR is more or less the Marshall Plan, even in terms of GDP, even a bit bigger. I mean, if you go through it, I'm not very diplomatic. I mean, it's delirious. You have got missions that are not mission. I will come back in a second what is actually a mission. So you have got a first mission that is called digitalization, innovation, competitiveness, and culture, all together. And then there is a breakdown in which culture and tourism is one item, and then there is another one that is digitalization, innovation, and competitiveness, as if they were the same thing. And of course, this is, in addition to the blah blah, these are transfer. These are transfer, tax rebates. There is nothing on mission. Then there is green revolution and ecological transition, which is left to good old Cingolani. That is a bit like putting Count Dracula as the head of the transfusion authority, blood and transfusion authority, but with nearly 70 billion, in which, again, most of it is blah blah, circular economy, sustainable mobility. The only serious thing is that you can understand the meaning is territorial imbalances and hydrogeological resources, and it gets just 15 billion. What is interesting is that energy efficiency and the building efficiency, that is the 110% transfer to the middle classes for their villette, gets 22.24. That is, it gets almost double the total labor policies. It gets more than supply of instruction from kindergarten to university, that gets 20, while to make the front of the middle class houses, you get 22. The total health gets 20. And health, of course, is not, there is no mention of new intensive care units or new expansion of the hospital. But there are two major items that are telemedicine and innovation, research, digitalization. Digitalization has got to be everywhere, like parsley, come il prezzemolo. And of course, when you say digitalization, that means transfer to digital oligopolies. That is obvious. Now, there is no, in all that, there is no place for actual missions. What are missions? Missions are precise objectives defined with I want to get there, to cite a famous sentence, whatever it takes. A mission is, say, the Manhattan Project on the atomic bomb. A mission is the Apollo program. But also a mission is Piano Fanfani to give a shelter to all the Italian peasants, to give a house. That was a mission. First Piano Fanfani, Piano Verde. It is easy to think of a list of missions that could have been seized given the pandemic. I mean, the first one is related to health. Develop vaccine free of intellectual property right. Have a mission related to drugs against antibiotic-resistant bacteria that are going to be the next crisis. Immune therapies for oncological pathologies. Double or treble the intensive care units. Strengthen the local health services. These are missions, and you can put, in many cases, you can put a number, for example, on intensive care units. I use this money to do that, whatever it takes. Ecology, massive electrification. Massive electrification, because if you keep saying electrical car, electrical there, you need to electrify much more the economy. With a major caveat on batteries, because batteries are very much polluting, and producing them is very energy intensive and pollution intensive. So one should think of also beyond batteries. Of course, electrification is totally useless if you produce electricity with coal. So part of the mission must be stop coal-based production almost immediately. Otherwise, it's a blah blah saying we want electrical cars. Electrical cars, and then if the electricity is produced with Polish coal or American coal, it's probably worse. In fact, long-lived gasoline in that case. Massive investment in renewable, truly renewable. For example, something relatively easy, bring back solar technology to Europe. I mean, people might not know that the major subsidy to the Chinese industry of solar panel has been Italy. We were and we are subsidizing the solar panels, but we penalized the European and Italian in particular producer of solar panels. So we are basically subsidizing the Chinese. I think it is bloody crazy. Hydrogen, you want it green. Is another important mission. And in fact, there is this debate. But for once, the electrical company Enel is on the good side and says, well, if you make hydrogen with methane, it's probably worse than using methane in the first place. You have got to have actually green hydrogen, and the green hydrogen you can basically get it with electrolysis. And I mean, it works. You need the scaling up, going down learning curves, solving bottlenecks. But this is a fundamental mission. Other fundamental missions are cleaning up the shit. Terra dei Fuochi in Naples. PFAS, the polyphosphate that have poisoned entire part of Veneto. Plastic waste. What are we doing with the nuclear leftovers? And this is a list of missions that relate to health and ecology that are not mentioned at all as such in the PNRR. And if one wants to have the ambition of restarting the entire social fabric, well, this is a moment in which you have got the convergence between artificial intelligence and robots. That is what is commonly called Industry 4.0. At this juncture, you can take two major trajectories. The trajectory that is automation worker complementary, or the trajectory substitution. Substitution plus control. And here is where policies have an enormous effect. I mean, in many respects, the Germans are conscious of that. I mean, and they say their Industry 4.0 is a political plan that essentially says that we lost the first round of ICT, information technology, because we lost the war. We could not jump on the computers for military purposes, etc., etc. We want to jump on a new one. That is the convergence between robotics and artificial intelligence. And the Industry 4.0 is, in fact, a political deal between the firms, the government, and the trade union, essentially saying if robots produce unemployment, let us export this unemployment. We are going to produce intelligent robots, and on the upper echelon of production, this is complementary to work. For the rest, who cares? We export them to other countries, and if this produces unemployment, so. The Italian Industry 4.0 is the people that conceived it, I mean, Calenda, poor guy, are not even aware of that. And so again, they thought of massive transfer to firms on the ideology they know better than we know, and uniformly. Anyone that goes and buys a computer and has a factory can apply for Industry 4.0, which is certainly not the case in Germany. There is a marginal attention on cybersecurity, marginal, essentially pushed by the military, but I'm not so sure that this is part of the Italo Center, the European Center on Cybersecurity. I'm not sure it is part of at the center of the interest of the government. I think it's more centered on shielding individual firms from hacking, privatizing social security, cybersecurity. While, there is a bigger issue that is, where is the cloud? Where is physically the cloud? Who can access it? And this inevitably has to do with our relation with the United States and China. And nobody thinks about it. This should be part of the mission. If we have some money left, and we want also to talk about military defense related mission, well, not to pursue the F-35 subsidy to the American technology and develop our European Tempest fighter bomber. Of course, hospitals come first. But if we want to arrive there, then we have Tempest and not the F-35. And then we have Italian or European drones and not the American Predators. And these are other missions, of course. I have not seen anything like that in the PNRR. I'm experiencing in the little fraction of the PNRR that goes to university, you have seen the 15 areas to which are going to allocate 1.6 billion euros, of which 160 are going to be allocated to socioeconomic sustainability of territories and networks. And it's part of the statement, is part of the blah blah we were talking about before. But I'm trying to fight to do our best on that. But I'm afraid that is an enormous waste of money. It could have been given to refinance massively the PRIN, the National Program of Research. Instead, we have this strange animal that probably, I don't know for the other, for the other disciplines. Maybe on the other disciplines much more serious. In quantum computing, I cannot say anything about that. I know that in our field is a major waste. And my suspicion is that this is the best part of the PNRR. The worst is straightforward transfer on profit accounts. This is my general assessment. Sorry I've made you depressed, but this is it.
Really thank Giovanni for your contribution. I agree with your picture about the trends in the Western advanced countries on the increasing inequality during the pandemic, only partially mitigated by social measures. I have two questions, curiosity and question, and then I ask also if there are questions from the audience. The first one is you mentioned the increase in financial, real estates, and digital rents, and you also say that it is possible to tax these rents. You explicitly speak about the digital rents. So, in what form? What is your idea in this respect? And the other point is, you have said something very similar to some points raised yesterday by Anna Maria Simonazzi about the PNRR, where she observed that, in a sense, the philosophy of this plan is to give tax incentives. There is not a real industrial policy behind it. But she concludes saying that perhaps there is time to do something. And so I would ask to you if you also think that with pressure by social parties, with intervention and so on and so forth, we can change something. Because I agree with you that, yes, the greatest part of the national plan are blah, blah, titles. Yeah, there is not a real idea of industrial policy. And so these are my questions. But if there are questions from the audience, I don't see. So please, perhaps you can
Yes.
you can say something about these points, and then if there are questions, we collect them.
Well, taxation, the most straightforward way is, which is also partly the way that the most recent agreement on international taxation on multinational took. I mean, you tax, in this case, the revenues originated in that place. Irrespective of whether it is value added, non value added, declared profit or not. I mean, it's very difficult to understand what is the value added of Google. You tax the revenues, and you don't recognize, for example, the royalties that Google Italy pays to Google Ireland as copyright, as whatever. So all the revenues go there, are taxed, which is easy. It's relatively easy. And my friend Modiano, that is possibly the only left-wing banker in Italy, says that it is possible, precisely given the electronification of almost all transactions, it is possible to tax also the financial wealth. Not that part that is in the paradises, or at least you get there later on. But there is a possibility of taxing also that one. That one if it is in Europe. What can be done? With this PNRR. I really don't know. I think one should try to intervene item by item. For example, university. You have most of the money has got to be spent in 3 years. So you cannot hire full-time people, permanent people. You've got to hire assegnisti di ricerca. I mean, if you use 1.6 billion to hire assegnisti di ricerca, this is more or less the reddito di cittadinanza of all people. I cannot conceive in Sant'Anna how can I find so many assegnisti di ricerca? So it's very difficult. I mean, given the rules, they must have been drunk when they wrote this. Maybe in other areas it's different. Here, I mean, you would need, if the government allows you, to do complicated operation of institutional engineering, in which you say things that I would pay on the normal allocation, I pay on this one, so that I can use the normal allocation to increase, say, my hiring. But this is, first of all, it requires the willingness of the Rettore. And then the minister has got to allow you to do that.
We have two questions. One from Antonella Stirati. So, Antonella.
So just a curiosity. You didn't talk about public investment in transports, which seem to exist under the plan. Maybe just in substitution as a funding of projects that were already there, like railways in the south, etc. But I think that at least should be good.
Yeah,
and I wonder if there is anything more, for example, building underground networks in the big cities or things like that, because that seems something that the country really needs. It's not sophisticated technology, but it's really needed. And I wonder if there is much about that.
Well, there is, it goes, there is under the heading of energy transition, which means everything, plus sustainable mobility, 25. 25 is a lot. If I imagine that it goes for a good part to finance things that have already been approved.
Yes.
For example, the high-speed train Turin-Lyon, the Trento-Innsbruck. Probably some
maybe
might even go to the south.
Let's hope so.
Yeah. I mean, the cables, we have already given an enormous amount of money to Open Fiber. And Open Fiber get the money of the state, but don't put down the cables. Sometimes they even contact you and they send you the new centralina, the new control, but then they don't come to put actually the fiber. So they ask you to send it back, but at the same time they got the government subsidy. It happens to me in central Pisa, that should not be considered as a peripheral area. Open Fiber got the subsidy and they don't get the fiber. So yes, I mean, I think that it is an enormous assalto alla diligenza.
Giovanni, there is also a question by Cucignato, who yesterday presented an analysis of the effect of the PNRR by means of the input-output tables, I mean, if I remember well. So.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Hello, Professor Dosi. I have to say a couple of things before the question because I wasn't able to follow all the presentation for good reason because I got the COVID finally. So I was traveling to an empty house. So I just followed the last part. And I heard the Professor Sastiati's question. The other thing is, I'm not optimistic about Europe or the next generation EU can change this. But I want to ask you if you don't see anything about industrial policy change in the next generation EU, and I want to explain myself better. Industrial policy in Europe were always have always been horizontal policy. They never try to make public economic planning. They not to mention public. I don't know. Public. I don't know. So you know better than me all of these, but I found something different in the words maybe about, for example, the idea of choosing some particular sector, like I don't know, hydrogen value chain or digital value chain, and put some money over there. All of the time with an idea of a public-private partnership. That's clearly not satisfying in my opinion. But still, I see some vertical concept of industrial policy for the first time in Europe, just in words, in Next Generation EU, and maybe more in the new industrial strategy and its updating of this July. Where the Commission technician found essential value chains in which Europe has to fight against its strategic dependency. So I want if we can hope better for the next years. Maybe too optimistic, but still, that's the question.
Well, yes, I mean, we can hope. Hope is...
it's free.
It's free. It is true that at least in the language, the idea of having a discretionary policy, sectoral policy, has come back. I mean, it's not a bad word that cannot be pronounced in public. The still is so vague. I mean, when you say digital global value chain, what the fuck does it mean? I mean, when one is unable to say, for example, I don't know, we have a dependence on semiconductors produced elsewhere. Now, and this is critical. I mean, the German car industry works is constrained by the lack of semiconductors. We have the only European major producer is ST Microelectronics. Less massively, not only subsidized, but tell and guarantee a demand, guarantee a procurement to ST Microelectronics, saying you have to produce such and such semiconductor components, and of course we guarantee the demand. Like, I mean, 3 months after Pearl Harbor, the Americans were able to roll out more or less 1 tank per hour. In Italy, I've been part for a short period of time of the Minister of Innovation Task Force. I asked as late as May who was able to produce the mask, the surgical mask. The government did not know. Did not know who was able to. And then they came up with Luxottica and Fiat. What is the relation between Luxottica, Fiat, and the mask is a mystery, but at least they were able to. So you see that, and in Europe, we have the only producer of the world of the machine that make the finest resolution semiconductors. It's a Dutch company. So I mean, we have the machines to make them, but we are unable to get our act together and saying let's have ST Microelectronics that buys so many equipment. They have, European firms have the priority on the machines if there is a supply constraint, and produce this bloody semiconductor. It's easy to have discourses. Then I share your hope.
Can I say the last very quick thing? I completely agree with you. My concern is why I don't know, Spain, France, Germany can have an industrial plan for automotive and for I don't know other strategic industries, and we are very, very, I don't know, our particular RRNP is empty. I agree with you, but I see other countries which are taking the money and for what they can do, and are choosing to a better use of these resources. I don't understand why we are not able to have a table with Stellantis and decide that we have to defend, I don't know, automotive production in this country if Spain is able to do that. What do you think about it?
Well, I think that this is a political economic question that is concerned the distance from the political establishment and the economic establishment. And in no country you have such a subordination of the political establishment to Confindustria, to the business association. Of course, I mean, Macron will not go against Stellantis, but there is a mediation in which the interest of Stellantis and the interest of France are mediated. When Stellantis asked around 6 billion of guarantees to the Italian government could have said, well, okay, you give me shares, and I give you this even forever. So we make it on equal foot with the French that have got shares, with the French government that has got shares. Nobody even imagined that in Italy. But I mean, you have Italian minister that receive order from Bonomi. I mean, not even Gianni Agnelli, Bonomi, instead. Bonomi. So I mean, is not only you don't have any separation between political power and economic power, but you have also the abolition of the subjunctive and conditional tense in the language, in Italian language, I mean.
Well, I Thank you again, Giovanni, and all of you for your participation. And so I close the conference. Thank you again to everyone.
Thank you,
Giovanni,
for the invitation. Thank you. And again, sorry for not participating to the rest of the most of the rest.
Okay.
Hope to see you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.